Welcome back to the Humble Market Timer YouTube channel. Once again, if you enjoyed the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. In today's video, we're going to talk about silver, price targets for the top. Before I go any further, please check the description for my disclaimer. Once again, these are my sole ideas, not investment advice. Now, on last week, I did a video, and in that video on silver, I told you exactly when silver would top, but I never committed to pricing. But in this video, I am going to narrow down exactly where I think at what price silver will top. Before I go any deeper, though, I just kind of look at a macro view of the market in silver and just kind of see how things work cyclically. December is typically a very good month for the stock market and also a pretty good month for precious metals. Oftentimes in the first part of December, you get some weakness, and then right around the week of Christmas, things start to uptick again. And so just kind of looking at how things have panned out thus far in December with silver, you can see that we were pretty much consolidating in the first 2 weeks of silver, really the first week and a half, and then a week, and then we exploded higher early part of last week, sort of breaking out a bit of consolidation that we had here. But on Friday, we had a pretty big pullback from the highs. We went to about a little under $65, around $65, but we had a big pullback on Friday. And oftentimes, we have gotten big pullbacks and reversals on Fridays in silver and a lot of times in most of the precious metals. But it was pretty notable, the big yank in the pullback in silver. And oftentimes also looking at the macro view, the week prior to the week of Christmas is sort of a time where you can experience weakness in the stock market in general and precious metals, because really it's the last week in which your big institutions will sell. Generally, they're off the week of Christmas and through the new year, so their really last opportunity to lock in profits is generally the third week of December. So the action that we had on Friday was to be somewhat expected, and I think there's a possibility there could be more weakness the early part of this coming week, the week prior to Christmas. But I think if there's any initial weakness, I think it'll be sort of flipped with buyers. Once all those institutional buyers are off for the holidays, I think retail will then come in and float the pricing right back up. So just sort of looking at silver in a macro view. And again, you can see the move here. You can see the nice big red candle that we had on Friday. Some people will say that's a reversal candle, but I really don't believe silver is done yet. So kind of looking at a broader view of silver and kind of doing some TA, let's kind of look at silver. I drew this line. This is the daily chart of silver. And in this line, you can see where we sort of formed a neckline here, but it's an ascending neckline. Usually with your necklines, when you're looking at measured moves, you get more reliable measured moves if the neckline is perfectly horizontal. But many times you can get nice price targets even if the neckline is at an incline or a decline. So you can still get that measured move, but a lot of times it's not quite as accurate as you would get if it was completely horizontal. But you can see pretty obviously that we have a head here This is a pretty long, shoulder on that side. This is the head. And then we had another shoulder right here. We broke above the neckline, consolidated a bit, and then we broke higher. So we're getting that action as if we are looking at a very nice head and shoulder, inverse head and shoulders, breakout pattern. And oftentimes your breakout of the neckline tends to be equal to the move below the neckline. So generally the distance from the neckline to the lowest point here, you can oftentimes get a measured move from the same distance above the neckline. And that's why you can do the measured move and take it from about the midpoint of the neckline down to the deepest part. And then you take that and move it to the breakout point, which was about here. And you can see what price that gives you for a potential move if we were to continue to push higher in silver. And what that is telling me is right around that 74. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a range instead of telling you the exact price. I'm thinking 70. That $73 to $75 price range is what it is telling me based on the chart. If this is truly acts as a breakout of an inverse head and shoulders, we could get a measured move to that 73 to 75. I'm measuring at 74, but that would be the measured move for the top of silver. So that's one way, one move to look at silver. Let's look at another way, because you can always look at TA from a lot of different angles. And so that's what I want to do. Yeah, let's zoom in on the daily chart a little bit more. I want to zoom in quite a bit here. Actually, before I do that, let's go to the weekly chart. And I just want to kind of pinpoint, and I want to give this guy credit because he's the one that first mentioned it. Gareth Soloway on Verified Investing, he mentioned how oftentimes you get, when you have massive moves, the massive moves tend to be similar when you have like those big breakouts in the past. The percentage of the move tends to be the same when you are making big breakout moves in the future. And so you always want to look and see, in the past when we got big breakout moves, how much did the chart actually go up? So if you do a measured move here of when we had a big breakout move in silver back in 2020, you can see it went up almost 160% in that big push. So that's one area where you can see where it made a big move. Let's see if we can find some other areas where it made a big move. Let's go back a little bit further. Here's another area where silver made a big move. You can kind of measure it from the period of consolidation all the way to the top. And as you can see here, this was 180%. So you got 180%, you got 160%. That scene when silver really makes its big move, it looks like you can get to that 160, 170, 180%, maybe even 200%, considering this has been in such a long cup and handle pattern. And when you have those long bullish setups, you tend to get very explosive moves out of it. So let's just see, based on, we said 180 and 160, let's look and see how much we have moved thus far to see if we're close to where you would say maybe a top would be based on what we have done in the past in moves percentage-wise in silver. So let's take a move, measure it from about here, which is this line right here, all the way to the top thus far, and we are at about 130%. So we still, based on the percentages, we still have a good bit of room left in what normally occurs when silver makes its big breakout moves. If you were to kind of measure it up to that 180 area that we got to in the past, that puts it about here. And if you scroll over, oh, it lost it. Let me bring it back. Move it from here. Oops. Get rid of that again. Try it one more time. Measure it from here to here. If we were to go all the way to about that 170, 180 area, that puts you right up in that 72, 73 area. So again, things are pointing right back to that in between that 72 to 75 area. That seems to be a spot that is pretty popular when it comes to gauging where we would go to if we were to get that breakout move in silver. This is saying about around that's in that mid 70 area. So that's one other area we can look at to be the top for silver. Let's look at one more setup. Let's go to the daily chart. And if you look in the daily chart, and let's kind of make this a little bit bigger, starting to see some new lines that are forming. You got a move that looks like you got action that's occurring right through here. You see this has sort of been acting as an area of support and resistance since September. You have action above here. We broke down, we retested it, broke down, went back. And if you notice, look at where we pulled back on Friday. We pulled back exactly to this line. So this line looks like it might have some credence. And so just trying to show you how I do a little bit of technical analysis. I then look at it and I say, okay, if that seems to be a notable line, let's start to do some parallels using that line. So if we look at this area and we move it down to about here where it looked like it might have bottomed, and then we were to sort of replace this midpoint line with where the top of this parallel currently is, which is where that line I initially drew was. If we move that up to about here where this line here, if I can get this to stay, with this line here, so the X at the top, you're now starting to see where we could go in the future for pricing. And if we were to, let's just say the price were to continue to go up through the end of the year, January, it'd be right around here. And if you look in this area right here, the price is about $72 again. So again, we're looking at that 72 to 75 price target to be potentially the top of silver. And just to kind of verify to see how that corresponds with, based on what I talked about in my previous video, the gold and silver ratio. If you look at the gold and silver ratio, you see we're making our way down to this key trend line that I told you was very important. I thought that once we hit this key line, whenever that would be, that would represent the bottom of silver. Go back and check out that video if you want more details. But we're currently at about 69 on the gold and silver ratio. We were as low as about 66 before we had the big drop in silver on Friday. If you kind of eyeball it, and you kind of work its way back down to where I'm saying in that 58 to 60 range would be the gold and silver ratio, which would be the top of silver, That's looking pretty accurate to coincide with that 72 to 75 price target in silver. So looking at all these different factors and areas in TA, looking at the macro, looking at what's sort of projected to be the price action as we move towards the end of the year, looking at silver from a weekly chart, looking at it more from a daily chart, looking at that inverse head and shoulders action, everything is pointing to silver topping in that $72 to $75 area. That will be where I think silver will top. Now, I don't think that will be the long-term top for silver, but I do think that will possibly mark a temporary top in silver where we have a pretty substantial pullback before we get another push higher. So keep that on the radar. Keep that 72.75 price target in your head. Check back with me to see if I'm accurate, see if I'm inaccurate, and we'll see if silver can get there in the coming weeks. Hope you like the video. If you like the content, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.